Will Goldstein here, thekingscourt.com. Again, I always offer a chance to subscribe to the videos down there by hitting that button. I'm a musician. You can always check out my music at thekingscourt.com and also at the About page on my YouTube channel. There's 12 links there. You can find all kinds of music, find out what my current music projects are. Listening to music, downloading songbooks for free, all kinds of stuff. Again, I'm doing Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell. This is the 4th video. I'm calling this Jesus, Myth or Man. And that's basically what it's about. A.F. Bruce says some writers toy with what they call the Christ myth. They do not do so on the ground of historical evidence, but out of ignorance. It is not historians who propagate the Christ myth theories. So again, I'm paraphrasing these. I can't read all of this. It's copyrighted, and I only bring out the highlights. Otto Betts says no serious scholar has ventured to postulate the non-historicity of Jesus. Cornelius Tacitus, who was born AD 52 and 54, somewhere around there, was a Roman historian in 112 AD. He was a governor of Asia. In writing about the reign of Nero, Tacitus alludes to the death of Christ and to the existence of Christians at Rome. So some of these aren't even pro-Christ even, they're just historical documents outside the Bible to prove the existence of Christ. Like I said, this guy was a governor of Asia. Around 112 AD he wrote this. Nero ordered the fire of Rome to suppress the rumor that he was falsely charged with the guilt. He tortures the Christians. Everybody believes that Nero set Rome on fire, and since he was accused of doing this, he had to find some scapegoat. I think he put them on stakes. I haven't read this stuff for so many years, but they wrapped him in tar and then set him and made them basically as torches throughout Rome. And he was blaming them for what he actually did. What a monster. If you want to create the idea of a monster in this world, Nero, Hitler. But anyway, Lucian, a satirist of the 2nd century, spoke scornfully of Christ. Like I said, spoke scornfully. He said, Christians have transgressed once for all by denying the Greek gods, worshiping that crucified sophist himself, and living under his laws. So he was complaining because they weren't worshiping the Greek gods or the Roman gods. Okay, so they considered them atheists because they didn't believe in the Greek and Roman gods. Okay, they believed in the one true God. It's a crazy story. Flavius Josephus, born AD 37, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, because he was the doer of wonderful works, a teacher of men, has received the truth with pleasure. He drew over many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. When Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men, tried to condemn him to death, those that loved him at first did not forsake him. He appeared to them alive again the 3rd day. The divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. The tribe of Christians are not extinct to this day, and this was early 2nd century. There's an Arabic text. At this time, there was a wise man called Jesus. His conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous. Many people among the Jews and other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and to die. They reported that he had appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion, and he was alive. He was perhaps the Messiah, concerning whom the prophets have recounted wonders. We have found many books of philosophers refer to the day of the crucifixion of Christ, says Bishop Apopius in the 10th century. We also find in Josephus a reference to James, the brother of Jesus. Annas received the high priesthood. A Sadducee, who were severe in the judgment of all Jews. There was a council of judges and brought before it the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ, who was named James. That's Jesus' brother. Together with some others, and he accused them as lawbreakers. He delivered them over to be stoned. So again, that's the brother of Jesus. Suetonius, AD 120, he was a Roman historian. Punishment by Nero was inflicted on the Christians, men given a new and mischievous superstition. This is from the Lives of the Caesars. Pliny the Younger, in Asia Minor in AD 112, is writing the Emperor Trajan seeking counsel as to how to treat the Christians. Jesus was not a man. That's why it's in all these non-biblical texts. You believe that stuff? I hope not. He had been killing both men and women, boys and girls. There were so many being put to death that he wondered if he should continue killing anyone who was discovered to be a Christian or just kill only certain ones. He explained he had made the Christians bow down to the statues and made them curse Christ, which a genuine Christian cannot be induced to do. So he was killing them because this is what the law of the land was, but he was killing so many of them, Christian men and women and the boys and girls, he just couldn't do it anymore. He's going, this is too much. We can't induce them to worship Caesar. What do I do? Just kill some? That's basically what he was saying. They were in the habit of meeting on a certain fixed day, these Christians, before it was light, and they sang an alternate verse, a hymn to Christ as to a God. That's because he is God, and bound themselves to a solemn oath not to do any wicked deeds, never to commit any fraud, theft, adultery, never to falsify their word, not to deny a trust when they be called on to deliver it up. These are the people that they were putting to death. People who, exactly like I said, didn't do any wicked deeds, or fraud or theft or adultery and so on. Tertullian, who was one of our early church fathers, he was a jurist theologian of Carthage in defense of Christianity, AD 197, mentions the exchange between Tiberius and Pontius Pilate. This is very interesting. Tiberius, having himself received the truth of Christ's divinity, brought the matter before the Senate with his own decision in favor of Christ. This is Tiberius in favor of Christ. The Senate, not given the approval itself, rejected his proposal. Caesar held to his opinion, threatening wrath against all the accusers of the Christians. Thallus, in the third book of Histories, explains darkness as an eclipse of the sun. It was at the season of the Paschal full moon that Christ died. We see the gospel accounts of the darkness which fell upon the land during Christ's crucifixion was well known, even from non-believers who witnessed it. They're talking about it. They're not even Christians. F.F. Bruce mentions a letter of Mara bar Serapion. In prison, he wrote to encourage his son in the pursuit of wisdom. Those who persecuted wise men were overtaken by misfortune. And then he mentions the deaths of Socrates, Pythagoras, and Christ. And he goes on to tell the story, again paraphrase. Famine and plague came to the Athenians for putting Socrates to death, a judgment for their crime. For Samos, burning Pythagoras, their land was covered with sand. What advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? Their kingdom was abolished. God justly avenged these wise men. The Athenians died of hunger, the Samians were overthrown by the sea, the Jews ruined and driven from their land. Socrates lived on in the teachings of Plato. Pythagoras lived on in the statue of Hera. The wise king, he lived in the teachings which he had given, wise king being Jesus. Elgin Moyer describes Justin Martyr, who was a philosopher, martyr, and apologist. He was well educated, had sufficient means to lead a life of study and travel, but he was a seeker of truth, and he knocked on the doors of Stoicism Aristotelianism, Pythagoreanism, and Platonism, but he hated Epicureanism, all about just pure pleasure. But Platonism appealed to him the most, but one day he was walking, he had this vision of God. He was on a solitary walk along the seashore, and the young philosopher met a venerable old Christian with a pleasant countenance and gentle dignity. He pointed him to the Hebrew prophets, and more ancient than the esteemed philosophers whose writings and teachings foretold the coming of Christ. Following the advice, this zealot Platonist became a believer in Christ and became a Christian. He devoted himself wholeheartedly to the spread of the Christian religion. Again, paraphrased. The Jewish Talmuds, so these are not Christians, these are Jews, referred to Jesus or Yeshua as Ben Pandera. And this is in the Babylonian Talmud. They hanged him on the eve of Passover. Pandera is a play of words. It's a Greek word for virgin, as is parthenos, and it basically means the son of a virgin. Joseph Klausner, a Jew, says the illegitimate birth of Jesus was a current idea among the Jews. The illegitimate, in other words, they didn't believe in the virgin birth. Miracles, God can't do miracles, right? They believe in God, but they don't believe he can do miracles. Oh, really? Gee, what did Moses do? What did Elijah do? What did many of the prophets do? I thought they did miracles. More from the Babylonian Talmud. On the eve of Passover, they hanged Yeshua of Nazareth. The herald went before him for 40 days, saying, Yeshua of Nazareth is going to be stoned, he that practiced sorcery and beguiled and led Israel astray. So that's what they said about him. They thought he was a sorcerer. Of course, that's in the Bible. Yemoah Eula was a disciple of Buchanan and lived in Palestine at the end of the 3rd century. And he adds, Yeshua of Nazareth, he was a beguiler. Things have happened to the Jews because they took that attitude, and many of them still possibly believe that. I think actually the mindset is dramatically changing in the Jewish community, and they should really take a look at some of the lies that have been told them from their ancestors. The Jewish authorities did not deny that Jesus performed signs and miracles. It's stated in Matthew 9:34. They attributed those acts to being sorcery. The Talmud speaks of hanging in place of crucifixion, a horrible Roman form of death, and only that came from Roman trials. For a curse of God is that which is hanged. That's from Deuteronomy 21:23. Simeon ben Azai said concerning Jesus, such a one is a bastard of an adulteress. They couldn't believe in the virgin birth, even though it's in the Old Testament clearly prophesied by Isaiah, a virgin birth. They still didn't believe it, and they said that this couldn't possibly be, so they obviously had sex, Joseph and Mary. That's basically what he's saying. The bastard son of an adulteress, Mary, mockery. Goes on to say, what is a bastard? Everyone whose parents are liable to death by the Beth Din. So the Beth Din is the Jewish court of law by the rabbis, for civil disputes and things like that. That's what that is, Beth Din. They were liable to be stoned for adultery or put to death. From an early date, Pandera or Pandera became widely current among the Jews as the name of the reputed father of Jesus. In the Encyclopedia Britannica, that uses 20,000 words to describe the person Jesus. This description took more space than was given to Aristotle, Cicero, Alexander, Julius Caesar, Buddha, Confucius, Muhammad, or Napoleon Bonaparte. So was Jesus man or myth? What do you think?